party people? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of The Sweat. I am your hostess with the mostest, Jesse Cofield, and we have a jam-packed show for you today. I'm talking NBA, NHL, what's going down in the world of PGA at the American Express in Coachella Valley, but let's get things started with our esteemed NFL panel. Hello, DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich, Pierce Dietrich, and Steve Buchanan. Guys, hell of a super wildcard weekend. My God. San Fran cruises past Seattle. Jags win on a walk-off. Bills edge Dolphins. Vikings fall short to the Giants. Bengals persevere over the Ravens. Tom Brady walked off into the sunset after the Bucs got their butts kicked by the Cowboys. Jeff, what was the biggest surprise of Super Wildcard Weekend, and why was it Brett Maher missing all 4 extra points last week?
Yeah, that's like the secret side story, like the choose your own adventure where you're just going, oh yeah, let's take the kicker who misses every single extra point, and all of a sudden, like, are the Cowboys even going to attempt a field goal in the next round? But
Dak was like, go for 2.
The biggest surprise to me is, like, honestly, I think just how wide open this is. Every team here has flaws. I mean, look, we are like one Mike McDaniel, dealing with the play clock away, one Tyler Huntley fumble from having the Ravens and the Dolphins in the next round here. I mean, there's no way that you can confidently look at any of these teams, even San Francisco, with some of the throws that Brock Purdy was making. Like, you can't sit there and be like, oh yeah, like Brock Purdy's fine. Like he's probably the worst quarterback left. So even San Francisco has issues. I think this is so wide open. I think a lot of these teams actually got exposed last week, but luckily for us and from for the NFL, their big teams are still alive. And we've got all like the big guns in the AFC. I think that the biggest surprise is just obviously the Jags. And I think that, and we'll talk about this more, but just how good the Jags actually looked in that second half. So we'll talk about that more, but the biggest surprise for me is how vulnerable all the top teams looked in the first round.
Yeah, Pierce, what was your takeaway after Super Wildcard Weekend?
Nothing really surprised me. To see the AFC North teams battling it out close, that's not a surprise. The Chargers are paper champions. To see them blow that game again, not a surprise. The Cowboys were supposed to destroy the Buccaneers, who are a sub-500 team. They did exactly that. The Vikings, a fraudulent team. They lost the Fraud Bowl. That could have gone either way. I think we saw pretty much what we thought we were going to see. The 49ers took care of business. The game was closer than what it should have been. It was almost basically a rematch of what we saw a couple weeks before that, where Seattle was hanging in there, one bad play, and the game completely turns. And we saw that with the offensive lineman downfield in the red zone. That forces a 3rd and long. Geno fumbles, and pretty much the game was over after that. Nothing really. I don't agree with Jeff in thinking that this thing is wide open. It's wide open because the first round wasn't the greatest of teams. We're going to see the best 2 teams in action this week, and we're going to realize that it may not be as wide open as he thinks.
All right, Steve, what about you? Takeaway from this weekend?
Yeah, with all the drama that kind of took place, I think one thing that was kind of masked over all of this was how well the Giants and specifically Daniel Jones was against the Vikings. You want to say how fraudulent that team is, fine. But that being said, the Giants did everything they needed to do and more to get that win there. I mean, Daniel Jones himself accounting for almost 400 total yards in that game, 301 through the air, 78 on the ground. He was their leading rusher in the win. And now you have them coming in as underdogs to the Eagles, which they should be. But let's not forget the Giants have been one of the best underdog teams against the spread the entire season, 11-2 in that scenario, covering by an average of almost 4 points. They've covered in 5 straight games now, 4 of which when they were underdogs. I'm not saying that they can come in here and beat the Eagles, but I feel a lot better about them potentially covering in this game than I did before Wildcard Weekend took place.
All right, so like, what did we learn about the teams who advanced past the wild card round? Like maybe something you didn't really know before, Pierce, and now you feel confident about with one of these teams?
I learned nothing.
Okay, cool.
Not that I wasn't looking, but it's 18-week regular season, 3 weeks of preseason. We've been going over this stuff since minicamp. If you're learning something at this point, then you're probably a mark. What did you see last week? Maybe you thought, oh, well, the Bengals aren't as good as you thought they were. Well, how good did you really think the Bengals were? They've had offensive line problems. The defense sometimes shows up, sometimes they don't. And I don't think you want to overreact to one playoff game. It is survive and advance. You know, every team that makes it to the Super Bowl, doesn't necessarily just cruise on through, and they have tough, tight games. You look at the Rams last year in the playoffs, they weren't really a powerhouse. They just won the games that they had to win, and they were presented with a decent schedule. But you go through any of those games, like they didn't really look like, oh man, the Rams are unbeatable. And so I think people need to make sure that they don't overreact to teams not being exceptional in the first round.
Steve, you mentioned before Daniel Jones and this Giants offense, but I mean, this is perhaps the worst defense in the NFL, Minnesota. They allowed 25.1 points per game this year. Only 2 teams allowed more. So, like, what do you think? Do you really feel like you learned something about that Giants offense after that game, or was it just that Minnesota's defense kind of sucks?
No, I mean, I do agree that obviously the matchup was soft for the Giants, but they also were able to do a lot of things that we haven't seen, like Daniel Jones, good security with the ball, like really no issues with ball security at all from the Giants. But one thing I did take away from that Cowboys game is that Dallas can be a dangerous team in the playoffs. And I was completely off of them coming into this game against the Buccaneers. I just thought the scenario of Brady at home in the playoffs where it would be able to take care of Dallas. But this is what's scary, is that Brady gets rid of the ball faster than anybody else in the league. The time in pocket sits at 2.33 seconds to throw. He had no time to throw in that game. Now they're going to go up against Brock Purdy, who ranks 24th amongst qualified quarterbacks for the time in the pocket to throw at 2.83. If Brady wasn't able to get rid of the ball quickly enough against his Dallas team, what do you think is going to happen to Brock Purdy, who at times was looking pretty shaky in some of his throws that he had last week against Seattle? So to me, even though people say, oh, the 49ers are going to roll in this matchup against Dallas, what if they're not able to really get anything going through the air? If that Dallas pass rush looks as good as it did last night against the Buccaneers and obviously just kept Brady uncomfortable the entire game, obviously a very seasoned veteran in Brady going up against the rookie in this game with the 49ers. So I think that's going to be something really interesting to watch, because that's the best pass rush I've seen from the Cowboys in probably 2 months, what we saw last night. So I think that's going to be something that's going to really be looked at in this game against the 49ers.
Jeff, what was a big takeaway you had?
That's an awesome point by Steve, because I think the big talking point against the Cowboys, how bad they were down the stretch. Their pass rush dried up. Their secondary wasn't as good with injuries, but they kind of turned around. If that team does turn around, and they're the first half Dallas Cowboys, they're absolutely a really tough L. My biggest point was the Jaguars. Again, this is a team that their secondary all year, bottom 5, like DVOA, not good. They allowed under 6.5 yards per pass attempt to Justin Herbert. And you say, well, they still allowed 27 points. It all came on turnovers in the first half. They were just handing the Chargers good field position. Of course, they were going to score the ball. If you take away those turnovers, the Jags defense was actually extremely dominant. And if that Jags defense can hold up against Mahomes, we saw what their offense can do. So to me, I think people are overlooking the fact that this Jaguars team may actually be pretty good. And they're on the defensive side I'm talking about. I think we know what their offense is capable of, but their defense taking a step up. Their rush defense has been good all year. If they start to play a little bit more just as a shell or shut down in the secondary, they're absolutely deserve to be a top 4 team in the AFC. They may even deserve to be a top 2 team in the AFC. So I think people are still overlooking the Jaguars. They just want to see what they want to see. The turnovers were obviously a huge story of that game. But you take away those turnovers, the Jags probably win that game by 3 touchdowns. So, I think I learned the most about the Jaguars last week, which sounds crazy because, it was obviously the craziest game on the slate.
So which team impressed you the most? And have your opinions on any of these changed heading into the divisional round? Steve, you said you were totally off the Cowboys, and now maybe you're on them a little bit here.
Well, like I said, they just looked like such a dangerous team in that game against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers coming into this game, I thought were very live, 2.5-point dogs. But not only were they getting it done defensively, Dak looked at his best we've seen in probably months, leading the league in interceptions despite missing so many games in the beginning of the year. Didn't look that way in that one against the Buccaneers. So this is obviously going to be a tougher matchup defensively against the 49ers. But like I just mentioned here, if they're really going to be able to stop this offense, and specifically Brock Purdy, and then, the 49ers obviously have one of the best running backs in Christian McCaffrey, but if that's going to be their only way to score points, then this really could end up being a strong spot for Dallas, which on paper, maybe it doesn't look that way. So yeah, I would say that Dallas is probably that team.
And Jeff, you were really impressed by the Jags, obviously.
I honestly think that the AFC is absolutely wide open. Like, I mean, it's not just that we learned about the Jags. So we learned about the Bills and the Bengals. I mean, the Bills secondary is, I mean, legitimately in shambles right now. Like, part of that is obviously losing a top player in DeMar Hamlin, but like if you can't stop Skylar Thompson from marching down the field like 4 times in the second half, when you had a chance up 10 to close out the game, you have serious issues with Joey Burrow coming to town next week. So like the Bills are absolutely defensively, like they just can't stop anything. And the Bengals, unfortunately, I don't know if they're much better. Like their defensive line just getting kind of pummeled by the Ravens in a game where they had a chance to kind of, up at one point as well. And really just both teams getting lucky to advance in a lot of ways. So again, with the Jaguars defense taking a step up and the Bills and the Bengals defenses, in my opinion, kind of regressing. I mean, you can make the case that maybe this is KC's, division or conference to win, but like they have their own issues, in my opinion. So I think that the AFC, what I learned the most from this weekend is that is absolutely a wide open division, and you should be looking at the team with the biggest odds in the Jaguars.
Pierce, you said you learned nothing from this weekend. So how about like a little history here? We got the Chiefs and the Eagles entering the fray this week. And last year, the first round buys didn't help the number 1 teams. Titans, Packers were both upset in the second round of the playoffs. So maybe you're like looking for something like that to happen.
Well, I won't say I didn't learn anything.
Well, you did say that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I did say that. I was impressed by the Ravens. I know the Ravens aren't in the playoffs anymore. No one probably cares, but we should take a second to just look at what John Harbaugh does with this team. He doesn't have a quarterback for the last 2 years, basically. They haven't had running backs for the last 2 years. Their wide receiving core wasn't very good last year, and there's nobody there, and yet they still made it to the playoffs. They still compete. They've got a new defensive coordinator. They are a very impressive team. Now, for things that might actually help somebody, if you're over at VSiN looking at some of the handles moving forward, the overs are getting hammered in every single one of these games. And then, the 2 favorites of the week, the Eagles not getting the money. The money's going towards the Giants. Chiefs are the public, and the money likes the Chiefs. Public loves San Francisco as well. I think, you might want to go in a different direction there. Maybe look at the unders as well.
All right, guys, let's move on to this week's divisional round playoff game. So we don't have salaries yet, so we're going to kind of roll through these. But who are you looking at for quarterback, Steve? Just like, don't have salaries, like I said, but who do you think is going to be in a good spot?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Joe Burrow going up against the Bills, I think, is going to be in a good spot here. A lot of the ownership is going to go to that Jaguars-Chiefs game with Lawrence and Mahomes, over-under of 53 points. So that's going to be the obvious spot here, but that's also going to bring down the ownership on somebody like Joe Burrow because, obviously that offensive line took another hit in that loss to the Ravens. But that being said, like he still has so many dynamic weapons at his disposal. It feels like he has 3 or 4 legitimate options to throw to in this game against the Bills, who really have taken a step back defensively since the second half of the season. The loss of Von Miller, I think, has really been huge because that pass rush is not as dynamic as it could be. And their secondary has been pretty questionable, even though they have their guy like Tre'Davious White and whatnot. Teams are still being able to go down the field. And last week was a perfect example of that, like Jeff mentioned. Now you're going to bring in someone like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, even Tyler Boyd. There's a lot of options at Joe Burrow for him to go to. So depending on the price point, I really don't think the ownership is going to get so high because all the big names are on this slate. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott. There's just so many options you can go to. I think Joe Burrow can easily get kind of lost in the shuffle here. So I think that's going to be your option for this week at quarterback.
Jeff, I know you want Emerson's Lord and Savior, Trevor Lawrence.
I actually would probably stay away from Lawrence. I think that Travis Etienne could be doing just a lot of the heavy lifting there, but that game certainly obviously has shootout potential. I would say, I love Steve's call with Joey Burrow. I mean, I think that again, the Bengals in a really good spot to take advantage of this secondary, but I think that Jalen Hurts probably provides the biggest floor and perhaps the biggest upside. I mean, the Giants was a nice win, but like that was the least surprising outcome for me of the weekend, that the Giants beat the Vikings. The Vikings are terrible. Their defense, it didn't even hold up against the run. Like the Giants defense, not good either. And Jalen Hurts is going to expose that with his legs. And if this game does get close, like you're going to see Jalen Hurts hold on to the ball a ton. He's probably going to do that anyways because it's the playoffs. So I think that Jalen Hurts is probably just the play to go there. This game could go so many different ways that helps Hurts. They could just get up. He could find the end zone a couple of times. And if Daniel Jones plays like that, it's going to be close, and Hurts will be throwing more as well. So I think Jalen Hurts is definitely the move for me at quarterback. But we got just a smorgasbord of options here. And I think Joey Burrow is another one that you can consider as well.
Pierce, an embarrassment of riches at quarterback. Who are you looking at?
Let's take Patrick Mahomes coming off the bye. Andy Reid coming off the bye at home, big time favorites. As Steve mentioned, the highest over under. All the early sharp money is on the Chiefs. The Jags, I mean, the offense can turn this into a shootout. Their offense can turn the ball over a lot and allow Kansas City to have plenty of short fields. 11th in rush defense, but Jacksonville ranks 30th against the pass. I'm not going to make it too hard on myself. I'll just take Patrick Mahomes.
All right, so is Etienne still the move at running back, Jeff? You mentioned him, or are you going to be going somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, look, that is definitely would be my favorite target on this slate. I think that, you look at what the Chiefs have done. They're kind of middle of the road in terms of rush DVOA, but they've allowed some big games to opposing running backs at points this year. The Titans are a team that, if you remember, Derrick Henry came in, beat them up, obviously grabbed the win. But I think the other place you can go on the slate is with James Cook. I like the matchup there. I think Buffalo's going to, we saw the blueprint that the Ravens put out. Can the Bills play good enough on defense to hold up? I don't know, but I think they're going to be running the ball a lot on offense. I think James Cook, 12, he got out snapped by Devin Singletary last game, but he took 12 carries to Singletary's 10. I think that's very telling. Cook was kind of the more explosive player down the slate. I think if you want a lower round option in DFS, Cook is where you should be looking.
All right, Pierce, where are you looking?
Jerick McKinnon. You can get him at plus 9,000 to be Super Bowl MVP. I know that might be a little far out, but we could get him playing a dynamic role, making big plays in the Super Bowl if they make it there. And I think he's got a pretty solid long shot. You also will have Andy Reid off of a bye going into that Super Bowl, dialing up some crazy plays for him. And I think you're going to see a lot of scheming for Jerick McKinnon this week after the bye week, working him in. I know he hasn't done much over the last couple of weeks, but they haven't really had to use him much. I think they're definitely going to need to use him and keep pace in a high-scoring game against Jacksonville. He's been pretty impressive as a rusher, getting big plays on screens. He's kind of like the poor man's Tyreek Hill this season, and I think he's going to go overlooked because he just hasn't been a big part of the offense in some meaningless games down the stretch.
Steve, what do you think? Who are you looking at for running back?
Yeah, going off what Pierce said here, the Jaguars have allowed the second most receiving yards to opposing running backs, but ironically, they're only one of 4 teams that did not allow a receiving touchdown to the running back position. But that being said, McKinnon ended the year with 16 red zone targets. That was the second best in the league, trailing only Austin Eckler, who had 25. But what makes this all the more impressive, heading into week 10, he only had 6 at the time. So 10 of those red zone targets have come from week 10 and beyond. That has become a very reliable option for Patrick Mahomes in the red zone. Do you have an over-under of 53? I think there's a good chance that we're going to see McKinnon be heavily involved in the red zone this week. So I'm with Pierce here. McKinnon is the option here at running back.
All right, Pierce, real quick, which wide receiver is making it on your roster?
Steph Diggs, if we think this is going to be a close game between the Bengals and Bills, we know in the close games, it's pretty much Diggs moving the ball the entire game.
Steve.
Yeah, I think A.J. Brown here. He's had big numbers in limited catches against the Giants. 8 catches for 165 yards and a touchdown this season here, averaging over 8 targets per game. That's going to be who Jalen Hurts is looking at in this game.
Who do you like, Jeff?
I would take a look at the Bengals wide receivers. I think it's a good time to pivot to T. Higgins. Been Joe Burrow's security blanket in a lot of big spots. And again, really want to be targeting the Bills secondary this weekend.
All right, thank you guys. Quick break here. Then we're moving on to NBA 4-game slate tonight. We will get our panels, DFS or sportsbook breakdowns coming up next. We've got a 4-game slate coming your way in the NBA this evening. Here to make sense of it, our NBA panel. DK's Nick Fryer, Gary and Thorne, RotoWire's Nick Whalen. Fellas, it is NBA fast break time. So rapid fire DFS or sportsbook picks for each of these matchups. So you're going to pick one. So your favorite play in Toronto, Milwaukee is Nick Fryer.
Well, this is a tough one, too, because we don't know what's going on with Giannis. So I'm going to stay away from the DraftKings Sportsbook side of it. I'm actually going to go with the DFS side. Pat Connaughton at 4.8K. You can play him whether or not Giannis is playing tonight. We've seen his minutes go up quite a bit since the new year. Under 29 minutes just once since the calendar flipped over to 2023. We also saw him do well against the Raptors last time these two teams faced each other, which was earlier in January. And Giannis did play in that game. Connaughton, 26.5 DK fantasy points. I'm going to take that at 4.8K all day.
All right, Gary, and are you looking at the sportsbook or are you going DFS?
Yeah, I'm still going to look for a value play DFS. I do think Giannis probably plays in this game. He's been pretty protected against back-to-back so far this season. It would make sense. They sat him in yesterday's contest. He'll play tonight, but we will see. I'm going to go to the Raptors side, though. I think Precious Achiuwa, way too cheap on this slate. He's $3,300. It's very rare to be able to play a Raptors value play. Their starters essentially play 40 minutes per game. However, Achiuwa, working his way back from a pretty serious ankle injury, his minutes are back up to where it seems like he's at 100% health. He played 28 minutes on Saturday against Atlanta. That's the most he's played since coming back from that injury. He scored at least 18 DraftKings points in each of his last 4 games. That would be 6x value at his current price point. And it just seems like Nick Nurse, who does not trust anyone on his bench, is willing to at least trust Precious Achiuwa. I think he's the Raptors' clear 6th man, and I think he's going to be sitting around 25 minutes tonight.
All right, Waylon, where are you going for this one?
Yeah, I mean, these guys are right that we really need to wait on the Giannis update before we can truly attack the sportsbook. And, it feels like in years past, we've kind of been able to predict the spots where Giannis would play, the spots he would rest, but I mean, he's missed 3 in a row at this point. So I think this is kind of well beyond the usual maintenance that we see with him. Either way, with Giannis, without Giannis, this has not been a good Milwaukee offense over the last couple of months. Just in the last 10 games, they've been one of the 3 worst offenses in the league. Still been a good defense. However, Toronto's been a solid defense. They've had their struggles on the offensive end as well. So if you want to get away from the DFS plays and go over to the sportsbook, as of right now, I would just play the under at 224. It's a relatively low total in the year of our Lord 2023, but especially if Giannis doesn't play, I don't see Milwaukee carrying its side of this.
All right, guys, let's move on to that Brooklyn-San Antonio matchup. Garion, where are you looking in this one? Nets have struggled to cover as of late.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting mid-tier value when it comes to Brooklyn. Obviously, they've got some usage to fill with no Kevin Durant. You could take a look at Royce O'Neal. Obviously, Ben Simmons is a very interesting DFS play. He's viable even when he doesn't score somehow. But I think this is the night to just pay up for Kyrie Irving. And I know he's been a little underwhelming in the 2 games he's played without Kevin Durant so far this season, or in this stretch since Durant went down to injury. Irving is just under 10K tonight, but this seems like a spot where he can really take advantage of this matchup. Obviously, San Antonio, the worst defensive rating in the NBA so far this season. You've got Kyrie Irving also averaging over 38 minutes per game his last 5 games. If he sees anything close to that minutes workload against a defense this poor, I think this could be a ceiling game for Kyrie, and I'm willing to take that chance on DFS tonight.
Yeah, Waylon, Brooklyn's gone under in 5 straight games here.
Yeah, honestly, I was hoping you would start with me for this one because I'm on Kyrie as well. You could throw him out there at DFS. Obviously, you're gonna have to pay up, but I think it's worth it. You could look into the over on 30.5 points over at the DK Sportsbook. Like Arian said, pretty underwhelming last 2 games for Kyrie without Kevin Durant, but I don't think that's going to be the case against a San Antonio team that not only is the worst defense in the league this season, they're the worst defense since 1990-91. I mean, this is historically bad defense that we're seeing from the San Antonio Spurs. We saw them get whacked at home on Friday by the Golden State Warriors. They turn around and allow the Kings to put up 130 on Sunday as well. I mean, it is an automatic 120 plus seemingly every night. And with Brooklyn not having Kevin Durant, this maybe does play into Kyrie Irving's favor because this might be a relatively close game. Like Gary said, you're hoping Kyrie Irving sees 35 plus minutes. I see the Nets winning the game. I don't see it being completely one-sided. So, if Kyrie Irving plays 38, 39 minutes, I think this could be a massive, massive night for him individually.
All right, Fryer, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I heard 1991 was a good year. But I like the over in this spot. Right now it's at 232. It opened at 235. Keep tabs on this throughout the course of the day because this has been going down methodically throughout the course of the day. It seems like the sharps are on the under right now, but I still like the over because no one sees the over hit more often than the Spurs. I know you mentioned earlier, Jesse, how the Nets have seen the under hit quite often recently, but in non-conference games, the over is 8-6 for the Nets. So I like this still at 232, but I would wait and see if you can get this down a little bit to maybe like 229 and a half, and that'd be a great number to move on.
All right, Portland, Denver. Nick, what do you think? Denver allows the third most points in the league to point guards, so this could be a big game for Lillard here.
Yeah, I'm a big Lillard guy. Never have a problem throwing him out there. It could be an Anthony Simons night as well. I wanted to highlight Yusuf Nurkic, though. He's at 7,600. Not a plus matchup necessarily for him, but not a bad matchup for a big man against Denver. He's played well in 3 previous matchups against the Nuggets this season, 37.3 DraftKings points per game. In those games, he's actually averaging north of 42 DraftKings points over his last 6. Really having a monster year statistically. In season-long fantasy, he still has some drawbacks, but in terms of DFS, he's been really, really good. He's been dealing with an illness for the better part of the last month as well, played through that, so might not even be at 100%. I love Nurkic at this price tonight. You can get him at 7,600 over at DraftKings.
All right, Fryer, what do you think? You looking on the sportsbook side or the DFS side for this one?
I'm going to go with the sportsbook side on this one. I'm going to go with the Nuggets covering at -6.5. I know we saw this bump up to -7 a little bit earlier in the day. I know in the Blazers, I know that they're the better team against the spread, but they're only one game over 500 against the spread as road dogs this season. And as home favorites, the Nuggets are 11-8-1 against the spread. Also, if you look at the market movement on this too, 53% of the bets are going to the Nuggets. So they are the public play right now, but they're also getting 60% of the handle. So there is some sharp money going towards the Nuggets.
Yeah, Trailblazers have failed to cover the spread in each of their last 7 road games. Gary, where are you going in this one?
Yeah, I will follow Nick here of the Fryer variety. We're going to take the Nuggets -6.5. Like you said, Jesse, 0-7 are the Blazers, their last 7 road games against the spread. The Nuggets are 6-1 ATS, their last 7 games at home. For the season as a whole, they are 19-3 in Denver. They're outscoring opponents by 11.1 points per 100 possessions at home. That's the second best net rating in the NBA within that split. We've seen this time and time again in the Nikola Jokic era. The Nuggets just bludgeon teams in Denver using that altitude advantage to their advantage. I really like -6.5 here. Even if it does get back up to -7, I'm still willing to bet that too.
All right, Fryer, take us to Philly Clippers. Where are you going on this one?
This is another one, like we talked about at the top of the segment, that's tough to go at from a DraftKings Sportsbook angle because Paul George right now is questionable. I still like Philly either way, but the Clippers are so good when you have Kawhi and Paul George on the floor. So I'm going to go the DFS route here, go with George Niang at 3.4K. Logged 23 minutes last game, and before that, his minutes had been down a tick, but he was sick before one of the games, and then there were a couple blowouts, so he didn't see his normal allotment of minutes. As long as he gets 20 minutes, though, which should be the case, is what he's been doing mostly of late. He's providing 5 times value. In the last 9 games that he's played at least 20 minutes, 8 times he's provided 5 times value. And one of those games was against this Clippers team where he had 19 DraftKings fantasy points. So not expecting him to light the world on fire necessarily, but should provide you 5 times value and a lot of savings.
All right, Gary, where are you looking in this one?
So talked about the ceiling that Kyrie Irving sort of provides on this slate. I think the opposite approach you could take at the point guard position in DFS is the floor of James Harden. He's been really, really solid his last 7 games. He scored over 50 DraftKings points in 6 of those 7 games. It just seems like he's sort of locked into that like 55 to 58 DraftKings point range. And at 10K, you'll take that every single time. I mean, 5x value from a guy who's priced this high is all you can really ask for. Harden, you obviously want to see a competitive script. You want to see him have to play his full allotment of minutes. The spread isn't everything when projecting that, but a pick'em would say that this game is going to be close and that Harden has to play maybe 37, 38 minutes. And right now you can pencil him in basically for a double-double every single night, considering his assist output. And he's even had 2 triple-doubles in his last 5 games. So not to say there isn't really high ceiling with James Harden. Obviously there is, but his floor is what is really appealing as a DFS play tonight.
All right, Waylon, you go in DFS or sportsbook in this one?
It's tough. I'll probably end up playing both if we're being honest. I love Harden at 10K. I'd rather play him than spend the extra 1,300 for Joel Embiid. I think Gary did a great job laying out the case there. I'm on the Sixers -1 as well. I think it is no guarantee by any means that Paul George plays in this game. If he does, he hasn't played in 2 weeks. Who knows what he's going to look like? Clippers have been very up and down, and it does feel like the Sixers are kind of finally putting things together now that Tyrese Maxey is back in the mix. I think James Harden is kind of settled into the perfect balance of facilitation and scoring that we've kind of been waiting for him to do. So I really like Philly in this spot. I know they're kind of in the middle of a road trip right now. It's not a back-to-back, but they played the Lakers on Sunday. So, you've basically just been hanging out in LA for the last 48 hours. Now, maybe that's a bad thing from a nightlife perspective, but you're not necessarily worried about the travel that would typically come on a back-to-back road matchup like this. So I think this is actually a pretty good spot for Philly, and I think this line could be another point or two in favor of the Sixers. So I'm on Philly -1 right now.
Yeah, it's Clippers -1.5 right now, so it's moved a little bit here. Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, I'm looking.
Yeah,
at
I was just looking to see if Paul George news got announced, and it hasn't. So I'm not sure what swung the line that much, but
Interesting.
Something to keep your eye on for the rest of the day, because odds and lines are always subject to change. Thank you, NBA dudes. Appreciate it. As always, we are on to tonight's NHL slate after this quick break. Welcome back to The Sweat. I'm Jesse Cofield. It is time to welcome in our NHL panel. We have NHL.com's Anna Dua and RotoWire's Paul Bruno. All right, guys, morning skate time. So I need your top DFS plays at each position. We got an 8-game slate coming our way this evening. We start at the center position. Anna, Connor McDavid, by far the most expensive dude here. Do you want to pay up for him?
I'm actually taking a look at Mark Scheifele instead of the Winnipeg Jets, largely because of his matchup. He's at 6,000 even, playing the Montreal Canadiens, and he has 5 points, 3 goals, 2 assists, and 10 shots on goal in just his past 4 games. He leads the Jets in goals this season with 26 goals in 44 games. I really like the line he's playing on with rookie Cole Perfetti and Blake Wheeler, so I'm rocking with Mark Scheifele.
All right, Paul, who you rocking with at the center position?
Well, there's a mid full of guys at the top end that you want to choose from, but the matchups that I'm focusing on are Austin Matthews against Florida. Look, he hasn't had a multi-goal game in a while, and the Florida goaltending is very suspect. Tonight, they're actually going to start Alex Lyon. There's third stringer on their roster tonight. And the Leaf offense has a chance to run up a score. So Matthews will be in the middle of all that. If you don't want to spend up the $8,600, take his second line center, Tavares, for $6,400. A nice saving for the Leaf captain, who's been on a nice run. Going back to the top of the board, you look at Leon Draisaitl over Connor McDavid, I think, for $7,900. That's quite a discount over the captain. And finally, Matty Beniers in that same game for Seattle. He's been scoring like crazy, and so has the rest of his mates. So I expect a high scoring game in Edmonton tonight. He costs $5,000.
All right, let's move to the wings and things department. Paul, where are you looking?
Kyle Connor for Winnipeg Jets has been wielding a hot stick for weeks now, and they go against Montreal. They're down to their third string goaltending tonight. $7,800 the price tag there. Back to the Leafs in Florida for Mitch Marner, who's got another consecutive points run underway, costing only $6,800 there. You can't overlook the Buffalo hotline with Alex Tuck priced at $7,100 against Chicago, a team that's leaking goals against. And finally, Philip Forsberg against Columbus, another team that's giving up a lot of goals. And Forsberg is the go-to guy for the Nashville offense, costing $6,500 this evening.
All right, Anna, taking a look at the wings department. Who do you like here?
I like Lucas Raymond of the Detroit Red Wings. They're playing the Arizona Coyotes, which I think is a great matchup for Detroit. Raymond has 3 goals and 7 points in his last 4 games. And the Yotes are just allowing so many shots night after night. They're allowing the 4th most shots per game in the NHL with 34.2 this season. Raymond is on a hot streak right now. I think he keeps it going.
All right, let's move to the blue line here, Anna. What is your strategy? You're going to pay up on the defensive end today?
Here's where I'm paying up because I've had a lot of value so far. Rasmus Dahlin has to be the go-to answer right now. He's playing the Chicago Blackhawks. He's at 7,700, 10 points and 3 goals in his last 7 games. He's having a phenomenal season so far. And the Buffalo Sabres are just so talented right now. They have the 2nd most goals per game in the NHL with 3.79 at the moment. So Dahlin's probably going to get on the score sheet somehow.
All right, Paul, what's your strategy on the blue line?
I let people blow their brains out in some of the big name guys that cost a lot. I'm going to go a little bit below them. Josh Morrissey, maybe the highest expense I'll pay on defense for $6,500. He's right up there in the Norris Trophy ranking right now, as well as the defense scoring stats. And he gets Montreal tonight. So tasty matchup for the Jets and their premier defenseman. Moritz Seider seems to have found an offensive game for the Red Wings, and he goes up against Arizona. They're starting to give up more goals than they were earlier in the season. So I'd pay the $5,200 to get him as the power play quarterback for a Detroit team that's scoring more goals lately. And then finally, Vince Dunn for the team that's scoring more than anybody in the last 3 weeks, is the Seattle Kraken, $4,600. Again, looking at that high scoring game in the offing and versus Edmonton.
All right, Paul, give us some value here. Where are you looking for that on today's slate?
Well, Anna already touched on Lucas Raymond. I'll double that and say I endorse that pick as well. He's playing top 6 minutes, costing only $3,900. And so that's value there. In the other players I'm looking at, Ryan Hartman from Minnesota, $3,900 playing top 6 minutes against a Washington team that played yesterday. And I expect that Minnesota will be fired up to run up a score against them. And Morgan Frost's been playing good top 6 minutes for Philadelphia, a team that has been suspect defensively, but they play a team that's even worse for them than them in the defensive department. Frost will light up the Anaheim goaltending today. And then John Klingberg in the same game for the other team has been leading the offense for Anaheim of late from his defense position, another $3,800 play.
All right, Anna, what do you think? We need some value here. Where are you going?
I'm going to Edmonton. Klim Kostin has 4 goals and 8 shots on goal in his past 3 games, and he has 7 goals in his past 9 games. So he's really turned it around at the end of 2022 and heading into the beginning of 2023. He's still playing with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Evander Kane might be coming back sooner rather than later, so it might shift things up a little bit. But if he's still on that line, I'm really liking him. He's at 3,400. Or giving Toronto some love, Timothy Liljegren. He has 3 points, 1 goal, 2 assists in his past 4 games, 11 shots on goal in that span. He's kind of picking it up as a secondary defenseman option, and he's at 3,100.
All right, finally, do you have an early lean for goalie, Anna?
If Samuel Ersson of the Philadelphia Flyers actually does end up playing tonight against Anaheim, I really like him because he hasn't played much so far in his NHL career, but he's done decently well when he has. Still 4-0-0, just appeared in 6 games though, so a very small stretch of evidence we have. But I like him against Anaheim because Anaheim is putting up the 6th fewest shots on goal per game in the NHL right now with 28.9. So the odds are in his favor to have a good night tonight if he gets the start.
All right, Paul, what do you think?
I've got 3 goaltending situations in mind for low goals against and a prohibitive win possibility here. That's causing me to spend up at the goalie position since they went cheap in other spots. Connor Hellebuck for Winnipeg, looking like the Connor Hellebuck that we all recognize from his best years. $8,300 in Montreal. I'm looking for him to get a goose egg tonight. Craig Anderson for Buffalo, another candidate for maybe a shutout for Buffalo in Chicago at $8,300. And then finally, the Leafs, no matter who goes in that, Murray or Samsonov, as prohibitive favorites for $8,100 or $8,000 respectively. Florida starting Alex Lyon, third stringer on that club, as I mentioned. Leafs are at home, and they've been playing well of late again. I think they got a chance to have a lopsided win there.
Yeah, and Paul, thank you so much for leading us in the right direction. We got one more break here to go on the sweat. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Sweat. I'm your host, Jesse Cofield. Now we bring in Action Network's Jason Sobel, who is on location in a beautiful place, a little place called Florida. Jason, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm at the LPGA season opener, the Hilton Grand Vacations LPGA Tournament of Champions at Lake Nona here in Orlando. So I figured since I was here anyway, I might as well get a nice background. There's a golf course over there somewhere, but I'm just going to hang by the water for now.
This is gorgeous. We love it. Thank you for setting it up for us. All right. So, Jason, 8 courses across 3 tournaments in 3 weeks. That's how the West Coast swing opens. What do we need to know about the course PGA West, and which type of golfers should we be targeting here?
Yeah, so we've got 3 courses in the rotation. Every golfer will play in a Pro-Am alongside a Pro-Am partner for 54 holes. So it's a little bit different than your normal 36-hole cut. They'll play the PGA West Stadium course, which also hosts the final round. That's sort of the main host venue. They'll play the Nicklaus Tournament course, and they'll play La Quinta. La Quinta is the easiest of the 3. Stadium course, traditionally the toughest of the 3. Essentially, you just got to make a lot of birdies. It's not as if this plays into the hands of the big hitters or just the great ball strikers, but you've got to make putts. And so we've seen since 2007, Jesse, 20 under or better has won this golf tournament every single year. It's not going to be difficult. They've had, as you probably heard, heavy rains out even in the desert in the California area. And so it's going to be softer. I expect a lot of birdies on the cards this week. So you're going to have to go super low.
All right. Well, after just one victory in 2022, Siwoo Kim claimed it at the Sony Open. It was a dramatic battle with Hayden Buckley. Kim currently sits at plus 4,000 to win consecutive matches, plus 360 to finish top 10. Where do you like him to finish this week?
You know, Jesse, Siwoo Kim is a fantastic examination from a betting perspective, because 2 years ago, we looked at him as a guy with a huge amount of variance. This is a guy who had won 3 times on the PGA Tour, including this American Express event 2 years ago exactly this week. But he also had a ton of missed cuts. He would go out there and shoot 82, 78, miss a cut, and then potentially win the next week. It's why bettors generally loved him, because those high scores and poor finishes would keep his number from being too short, and yet he had a winning upside. That's all changed. Last season on the PGA Tour, only one top 10, so the ceiling was lowered a little bit, but the floor got much higher. I don't know if that's something he worked on. I'm not even sure that's something you can work on, consistency, but it's worked for him. He made the cut in 23 of 29 events last season. He's 5 of 5 so far this season. Of course, coming off the victory last week, that floor is still high, but the ceiling is getting higher and higher. I like the high ceiling, high floor combination, as anybody would. I'm not chasing him for a back-to-back win, but I do, because of that floor, like him in some matchups against some similarly priced players this week at the Amex, where, like I said, he won 2 years ago.
All right, well, Jason, 5 of the top 10 golfers in the world are in the field for the American Express. So which is your favorite to finish T5? You got Scheffler, Rahm, Cantlay, Schauffele, Zalatoris. Who do we like?
Yeah, what a field. First of all, we've heard all about these designated events, elevated events on the PGA Tour schedule. And I, quite frankly, thought there would be a sense of the haves and the have-nots. This is supposed to be one of the have-nots, and yet we've got, like you said, a whole bunch of really good elite-level players up there. I've got to, though, go with Jon Rahm. If you're giving me that question without odds attached to it, Jon Rahm is playing as well as anybody in the world right now. I believe 5 straight top 5 finishes coming off a victory 2 weeks ago at the Century Tournament of Champions. He won here back in 2018, has a couple of other top 15 finishes. Jon Rahm's my guy out of that group.
All right, Rahm, plus 150 to T5 as of right now. Favorite pick to finish top 10? What do we think?
Yeah, so I gave you Cam Davis last week with the caveat that I didn't necessarily love him at YLI, but I just like him in general, and I thought maybe he could pop there. The ball striking numbers were really good, even though he didn't break the top 30. I'm going back to the well on this one. Cam Davis is going to have a massive season. He was solo third at the Amex just 2 years ago, has never finished outside the top 30. This should be a really good spot for him this weekend. I'll throw in one more little bonus top 10 for you. Taylor Pendrith, another guy I'm very high on this year. I expect him to have a nice week and a really nice season.
All right, who are you fading this week? Telling the people to just stay away from.
Jesse, I'm never shocked by anything, but I'm very, very surprised that less than 2 weeks after withdrawing from the Century Tournament of Champions with a back injury and only swinging it, as he said, 80%, Xander Schauffele is teeing it up this week. That doesn't seem like, first of all, something we expected. It doesn't seem like that's maybe the best move. I'm guessing he feels healthier. I'm guessing he feels like he can go out there and give it a shot. But this is a very long year, and I'm a little worried about Xander Schauffele going out there. If he is not 100% and trying to play golf this week, quite frankly, I could see him WDing again if that back isn't as healthy as he'd like it to be. I'm staying far away from him this week.
All right, finally, who will win the American Express?
Can I give you 2 outrights, Jesse?
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
going back and forth. They're both about the same number. I love Sahith Theegala, like Davis, like Pendrith, a guy that I'll be on a lot this year. He's right around plus 5,000 this week. But I've also targeted Andrew Putnam, a guy that I really have liked for this event. I wrote him up in a column before the year even started as a guy that I was targeting for the American Express. And he just happens to be coming off a 4th place finish last week at the Sony Open. I believe he's plus 6,000 in the marketplace. He opened up as a much bigger number. If you got him Monday morning early, congratulations. For those who didn't, I still don't mind the number right now. I think Putnam's going to have a very big week this week.
Plus 5,500 for Sahith and plus 6,000 for Putnam right now. Thank you so much, Jason. We love it. Go enjoy the nice weather. Thank you. That is a show. I will be back in studio with Emerson Latzia tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. See you then.